I was there when the most powerful woman in Brussels made the fatal mistake that shattered her career in exactly 47 seconds. Ursula von der Leyen didn't pause to consider the cameras or calculate the political cost. She leaned into the microphone at 2:34 p.m. and delivered what insiders call the most catastrophic diplomatic blunder in EU history. What happened next wasn't just political theater. It was a complete institutional meltdown captured in real time. The comment that destroyed everything came during a routine press briefing on trade relations. Von der Leyen, flanked by advisors, appeared confident approaching the podium. The question seemed innocent from a Financial Times correspondent about negotiations with the Trump administration. That's when she said it. President Trump's erratic approach to international relations makes him fundamentally unsuitable as a partner for serious diplomatic engagement. We must prepare for 4 years of managing an unstable regime. The room went dead silent, not the polite quiet of diplomatic consideration, but the suffocating silence of a career ending in real time. I watched as her chief of staff, Björn Seibert, visibly paled behind the cameras. His hand moved instinctively toward his phone, already calculating damage control scenarios that would prove impossible. Within minutes, the political earthquake began. My phone exploded with notifications as Washington's response materialized with unprecedented speed. Trump himself fired off a statement within 12 minutes, calling von der Leyen a failed bureaucrat desperate for relevance and threatening immediate consequences for what he termed unacceptable disrespect from a freeloading institution. But the real devastation wasn't coming from across the Atlantic. It was erupting within the European Parliament itself. I witnessed German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's office release an emergency statement distancing Berlin from von der Leyen's remarks. French President Emmanuel Macron's spokesman called the comments personally unauthorized and diplomatically reckless. Even traditionally supportive Nordic countries remained conspicuously silent. The numbers tell the brutal story of her isolation. Within 6 hours, von der Leyen's office received formal complaints from 14 member states. Poland demanded her immediate resignation. Viktor Orban called for an emergency European Council session to address institutional insubordination. The economic consequences materialized even faster than the political ones. European markets, already nervous about potential trade wars, crashed as investors processed the implications of a hostile US-EU relationship. The euro dropped 2.3% against the dollar in afternoon trading, while German automotive stocks shed $15 billion in market capitalization within hours. I was monitoring real-time data as panic spread through Brussels bureaucracy. Internal memos revealed emergency meetings across multiple directorates. The tone was funeral. Officials were positioning themselves for a post-von der Leyen reality. The most damaging revelation came 12 hours later when documents leaked from the Washington transition team showed Trump's advisors had been preparing a comprehensive retaliation package even before von der Leyen's comments. Her remarks simply provided the justification they needed to implement what sources describe as economic warfare disguised as trade policy. The leaked proposals are devastating. A 35% tariff on German automobiles, suspension of all defense cooperation agreements, immediate termination of the EU-US Privacy Shield framework that protects billions in data transfers. Most catastrophically, withdrawal of U.S. support for NATO Article 5 guarantees for any nation that fails to condemn von der Leyen's diplomatic aggression. I spoke to current and former Commission officials who painted a picture of complete systemic breakdown. One senior advisor, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the atmosphere as apocalyptic. The Commission's carefully constructed relationship with Washington, built over decades, had been destroyed by a single moment of what he called stunning political miscalculation. The personal toll on von der Leyen became evident during her attempted cleanup press conference 18 hours later. I observed her hands trembling as she read from prepared remarks, her usual commanding presence replaced by visible desperation. Her attempts to clarify her statements as taken out of context convinced no one. The damage was complete and irreversible. European media coverage has been uniformly brutal. Le Monde called it the end of European credibility. Der Spiegel's headline read, "The Woman Who Broke the West." Even traditionally pro-EU outlets like Politico Europe described her position as politically terminal. The cascade of resignations began within 48 hours. 3 commissioners submitted formal letters citing irreconcilable differences with the president's approach to transatlantic relations. Her longtime spokesperson, Eric Mamer, quietly submitted his resignation, followed by key cabinet members who clearly recognized the futility of defending the indefensible position. I watched as the European Parliament prepared for what sources describe as the most contentious session in its history. Opposition leaders from across the political spectrum, normally divided on everything from migration to monetary policy, found rare unity in their calls for von der Leyen's immediate removal. The ultimate irony is that von der Leyen's comment wasn't even factually incorrect. Many European leaders privately share similar assessments of Trump's leadership style. But in the brutal calculus of international relations, being right matters far less than being diplomatic. She forgot the cardinal rule of EU leadership. America might be problematic, but America remains indispensable. The fallout continues to accelerate. I'm monitoring reports that the incoming Trump administration is considering unprecedented retaliatory measures. These include potential suspension of intelligence sharing agreements, withdrawal from climate cooperation frameworks, and most devastatingly, public support for Brexit-style exit movements in other EU member states. Von der Leyen's political obituary is already being written by the same Brussels establishment that once celebrated her ascension to power. The woman who was supposed to represent European sovereignty and independence has instead demonstrated the continent's continued dependence on American goodwill. The cruel mathematics of her situation are undeniable. She cannot survive a confidence vote in the Parliament. She cannot repair relationships with Washington. She cannot unite the member states behind her leadership. The only question remaining is whether she resigns voluntarily or faces the humiliation of formal removal. As I file this report from Brussels, von der Leyen remains in her office, surrounded by the remnants of a crumbling administration. The European project itself faces its most serious crisis since Brexit, triggered not by external enemies but by the fundamental miscalculation of its own leader. The backroom conversations I witnessed in the hours following the disaster revealed the true depth of institutional panic. Maroš Šefčovič, the Commission's executive vice president, frantically coordinated with national capitals in what insiders described as damage control bordering on desperation. His normally composed demeanor cracked as he fielded increasingly hostile calls from Berlin, Paris, and Rome. The psychological toll on von der Leyen's inner circle became apparent during private briefings. Cabinet members spoke in hushed tones about legacy preservation and dignified exit strategies. The woman who once commanded absolute loyalty now found herself increasingly isolated as advisors began distancing themselves from her political corpse. I documented the precise moment when European Council President Charles Michel publicly broke ranks. His carefully worded statement, released at exactly 11:47 p.m. Brussels time, represented the final nail in von der Leyen's political coffin. The Commission President's personal views do not reflect the official position of European institutions, he declared, effectively ending any pretense of institutional solidarity. The most devastating betrayal came from within her own political family. The European People's Party, von der Leyen's traditional base of support, convened an emergency meeting where sources tell me her removal was discussed with clinical detachment. Manfred Weber, the EPP chairman who had championed her rise to power, now spoke of her as a liability to center-right credibility across the continent. Financial markets continued their brutal assessment of European leadership stability. I tracked the real-time collapse of European bond prices as investors priced in the probability of institutional chaos. The yield spread between German and Italian bonds widened to levels not seen since the Eurozone crisis, as traders questioned the fundamental stability of EU governance under crisis. Intelligence sources revealed that Washington had been monitoring von der Leyen's communications for months. The Trump team possessed detailed transcripts showing she had used even harsher language in private conversations with EU leaders. The strategic implications extend beyond personal destruction. NATO officials expressed genuine alarm about the alliance's future under a hostile US-EU relationship. One general described her comments as a gift to Putin, complicating Western unity when coordination is essential. The human drama in the Berlaymont building reached its climax when von der Leyen's husband was spotted leaving Brussels for Munich. Staff described it as the moment we knew it was over. During a routine commission meeting, von der Leyen faced commissioners who barely made eye contact. Agenda items were discussed around her, as if she had ceased to exist politically. The meeting concluded without any mention of her leadership, silence more devastating than formal censure. The international press descended on Brussels with unprecedented intensity. Veteran correspondents described von der Leyen's downfall as one of the most complete political destructions they had witnessed. Late-night emergency sessions in member capitals revealed the cost of her miscalculation. Hungarian officials were preparing formal proposals for an EU-US reset explicitly repudiating von der Leyen's approach. Polish representatives described her comments as potentially treasonous to Western interests. The lesson is clear. In a world where prosperity depends on American markets and security relies on American protection, even truthful criticism of American leadership becomes a luxury European leaders cannot afford. Von der Leyen learned this precisely 47 seconds too late. Her political suicide will be studied as the definitive case of how personal conviction can destroy institutional credibility in one catastrophic moment.